So thanks for popping on to the online thing. I know one person had a problem with the link. Did anybody else have an issue trying to jump on there or hearing me? Okay, good. I'm not sure what they're going to do yet with that class that was officially canceled. So when they do that, we'll either decide if we want to have another class or quiz review or just hear the class to figure that out when that happens. But at least we're ahead of the game, and we've had a practice in terms of what we can do if we can't get in for some reason, like the power problem that we just had. If anybody had any issues or complications with that, feel free to hit me up later and we can work through it for next time. We have a record number of slides today. We're going to be talking about vision. Actually, we're not talking about vision, we're talking about the eyes. We're going to talk about vision another time. The quote for today is, "At the moment of vision, the eyes see nothing." And I'll clarify that in a little bit. You can think about that, but we use our brains to visualize things. So the visualize and vision sort of have the same root of vis associated with them. And really the eyes without the brain doesn't let you visualize things. But you can visualize things without your eyes. You close your eyes, you can dream and see things in your brain. So there's a difference between the two. I want to make sure I got you the next reading. So I don't have the homework yet. I don't think the next homework's due till the 20th. Whatever's on the audio. But I want to make sure we're reading in chunks so that you're not trying to read the book all in 1 week later. There will likely be some questions on the next homework related to this chapter. And I'm guessing I'm going to assign one more chapter before the next homework. But this is the only one I'm assigning right now, which is chapter 2. So hopefully you've read the introduction in chapter 1. And now you can read chapter 2. I had left this block here, and no one asked me about it, but does anybody know who the book is dedicated to? What? Sophia. Yeah, not the Sophia, but apparently the author's daughter is also named Sophia. And I just thought it was an interesting coincidence. Okay, so how do we get here? At least last couple of times we talked about the environment, and we said that the environment is reality, but we don't have the ability to be one with reality. So in order to observe reality, which is something separate from us, we have 5 different types of energy or interactions that we can make use of. And human beings have 6 types of senses. That's including the traditional 5 types of senses plus our ability to sense internally. And that when we put the information coming from those senses together in our brains, we create representations of reality, and those become then our own realities. Each one of us has our own reality, which is distinct from the reality of others and distinct from the actual reality of the environment. Last time on the online class, we talked about the human ears, and we talked about how they can only detect a small part of what's going on sonically around us. And we talked about electronics being able to do better, which led to the question of, when we do artificial intelligence, do we stick with what humans are limited to, or do we make use of the sonic, or the ability of artificial systems to observe the sonic spectrum outside of what humans can do in the infrasonic or the ultrasonic? Today we're going to talk about light sensing. And when I mean light sensing, I mean what's going on in your eyes. And I'm going to try to keep that distinct from vision sensing, although it's impossible to do and have a useful discussion. But later on in the course, we're going to talk about vision, which is more about how your brain makes sense of what's coming in to your eyes in a more sophisticated manner than what I'm going to do today. So we're going to talk about how our eyes sense, and similar to the discussion we had in sound, we're going to talk about frequency ranges, although here now these are frequency ranges of the electromagnetic spectrum versus frequency spectrum, frequency ranges in sound, which was vibrational frequencies. Okay? We're going to talk about the dynamic ranges. And then just like we did in sound, when we went from the ear to microphones, and then talked about how we can take the output of microphones and get it ready to go into an AI. We're going to do that again here with artificial sight. So we'll talk about the analog to the microphone, which is the image sensor. And we'll also talk about briefly some AI applications. As I say that, I remember that I promised there was going to be a poll, and I just didn't get around to doing the poll. So the poll is just basically a survey that I'm going to put online on Piazza to find out the comfort level of the class and going into some more coding examples at a deeper level where we're actually doing. That'll still take. Hopefully we'll get through all of light sensing today, and that'll allow us next time to begin with smell sensing. Okay, I alluded to this earlier. So the difference between what's going on in your eyes and what's going on in vision is comparable to what we talked about before in sound, where you have vibrating eardrum that's causing vibrating little bones that's causing vibrating fluid that's going into an electrical signal. And it's that electrical signal then that your brain is going to make sense of. Here, we're going to talk about eyesight, and so we're really going to focus first on your eyes and what's going on in your eyes. And we'll leave vision, although we'll talk a little bit about vision now. We'll leave that to later. As I mentioned, there's not really a fine line. You get much use out of your eyes unless you apply vision, but the vision examples that I'm going to use today are going to be fairly basic. They're going to require some interpretation to make use of the examples, but we're not going to be doing the sorts of mental tricks, if you will, that we did when we were looking at the McGurk video in one of the prior classes. We're not going to be doing lip reading or that sort of thing today. Okay. So this is basic biology. If you already are familiar with this intimately, you're way ahead of where I was 48 hours ago, because I had to go remind myself of these things. I hadn't used it for a while, but I think it's a helpful parallel, and you'll see, just like in sound, in microphones, even today, over 100 years after the first microphone, pretty much works like our ears work, and that there's something that's vibrating that causes electrical impulses. Same thing happens here with vision. So this is your eyeball. Here, basically light that's coming in this case, I guess it's the leaf. Light's going to be reflected off that leaf, and it's going to come into your eye, and it's going to first hit this cornea, which is going to collect the light and allow it to at least have an opportunity to get into the eye. And that depends on where this iris is. As we talked about before, that you have sometimes cases where there's a lot of light, and there's some animals that can sort of reduce the amount of light that gets in. And we can do the same thing. We do that with our iris. Light that gets in goes through this lens here and makes its way to the back of the retina. And the retina is actually pretty huge, if you will, from the circumference perspective. But it's what has all of the cells and the proteins that interact with the light that then transduce that light into electrical signals. So It's all about electrical signals at the end, and that's what gets to your brain. So the cornea collects the electromagnetic radiation we call light, or visible light, like you can see, goes through the lens, hits the retina, and then the nerve cells, and there's two types of nerve cells, as you'll see, transform that light into electrical impulses that go down this channel into your brain. Okay, so I'll make a lot of analogies of these for a little while. Last class in sound, vibrations ended up becoming electrical impulses, and the same thing is here, light coming into the eye ends up becoming electrical impulses. And you can see actually on the back that the image from this leaf is upside down. And so you can imagine there has to be some mapping between the signals going down the optic nerve to your brain to have your brain see things right side up. So we're going to zoom in here and take a look at the particular cells. There's rod cells and there's cone cells. And they both convert the photons that are coming in, that energy, into electrical impulses. The difference is where they're located and how many there are. Rod cells don't detect color. They basically detect light intensity, independent of giving a human a color representation. Cone cells, there's actually 3 different types of cone cells, and they call them red, green, and blue cone cells. As you might imagine, the red cone cells have more to do with red light, blue with blue, and green with green. You have on the order of 100 million rod cells. Those are the, if you want to call them, the gray scales, or the black and white cells. They're distributed all along the retina, as we talked about, and the reason for that is when we have very low light conditions and the iris is all the way open, then you're getting in light from different angles. Basically, you're getting it as much light as you possibly can, and it's those rod cells that are distributed here that are allowing you to see when there's not very much light. And I can't really explain why. We don't have color cells everywhere, but when we don't, most of them are focused back in here where we do have a lot of light. So if you haven't noticed it, when the sun starts going down and you look off at a distance, you can decide if you're actually seeing colors or if your brain is just filling in colors because you know something's grass or you know something's tree. Because the reality is when there's not a whole lot of light, only the rod cells are really being processed by the brain. Okay? So 3 cones, 3 different types of cone cells that allow you to see red, green, and blue, and every combination thereof, which allows you to see all the colors in the visible space. This is what's called the spectral response of the different cells. We talked about there being 4 cells. We can start first with the rod cells. This is the visible spectrum, which is 380 or 400 to about 1,700 nanometers. That's the wavelength of the light. And you can see when, and these are all normalized, by the way, so it's not that you have the same amount of sensitivity. Remember, when your rod cells are really dominating what you're seeing, you're not really getting much signal from them except the color cells. They're always there. They're always doing their thing. It's just when there is a lot of light, then these colored ones are going to dominate. Right? Because remember the rod ones are distributed, so they're not going to get access to what's going on. Okay. And there's blue and green and red cones. Interestingly enough, you look at the colors here, right, as a function of wavelength, the peak of the red, which is where the red cones are like the most sensitive to light, is actually right around yellow. And so this took me a little bit of time to sort of think about and say, well, why aren't these called the yellow cones if they're more sensitive to yellow? If you look actually where red light is, red light's centered closer to 700 nanometers. And so, so it's way off the peak. So so the red cones are more sensitive to yellow light, and the blue cones are more sensitive to magenta light. So if you actually look, the blue cone peaks over here, the blue is more in this range here. So does anybody, specialist in biology, or do they know why they're not called yellow cones? One thing that can't be said about the red cones is that they're pretty much the only cones that are going to give you any sort of information when you're looking at red light. So if you're looking at red light over here, your green cones aren't going to be doing anything, your blue cones aren't going to be doing anything, and really your rods aren't either. So if you're in the dark and someone would turn on red light, the only thing that would be interacting with that really is the red cones. All right, so human eyesight cone sensitivity. Remember all those other cones on the other slide, they were all normalized. That means that for the same amount of light, not all the cones are going to be as sensitive. So this is now showing you the sensitivity of your eye with respect to the color of light. So your eye, just like in sound, you might recall we are more sensitive to sounds that are sort of in a 1 kilohertz range, even though we can hear things that are from 20 hertz to much higher. Same thing here. So even though we can see between roughly 380 to 400 nanometers to 700 nanometers or so wavelengths of light, or violet to red, we can see things that are green a lot easier than we can see things that are red or violet. And that sort of makes sense. When you get into the violet, you're pretty close to being outside of the range that you can see. And so what color do you see if all the light in the room was at 350 nanometers? What color do you see? Black. Now, if all the light in the room all of a sudden went from 700 nanometers to 750, what color do you see? Black. So basically, everything is going to converge into the absence of light, which is black. And we get off in these ranges. And then you can also imagine that as you bring the intensity of light down, regardless of the color, when you go below the sensitivity of your eye at that color, if that's the only color, what are you going to see? So imagine you were in a room where there's only green light, no other light, and we just drop down the brightness of the green light. At some point, what color do you see? Black. So that's the unifying color, whether you're going off this side of the range and frequency, or you're going off the chart this side of intensity. Okay, now we're making a transition to technology. This is another way of looking at the color chart, and that's starting red here, and then working your way along orange, yellow, and so forth, until you get back to red. And just like in that, what we talked about darkness, where they kind of converge, I think you can kind of see that here, where you can actually convince yourself that things all the way on the other side blend well with red. So you can go start from red, go down the spectrum, work your way all the way around back. and then basically work your way back to red. Here, you see a lot of colors represented. If you go along the outer edge, they're brighter, and then as you come along the inside, they become darker and sort of blend in, right? They're all sort of the same color. This is showing, and I think most people would know this, so I wasn't going to remind you, but you can make any color appear by combining three what are called primary colors. And in this case, in the monitor that you have here, you're combining red, green, and blue. So from red, green, and blue, you can make any of these other colors. You can also make any of the other colors by combining yellow, cyan, and magenta. It doesn't have to be red, green, and blue. Your display uses red, green, and blue, but printers use yellow, cyan, magenta, and black. Does anybody know why? Well, you use logic and think about it, and I guess out loud.
Like maybe it has to do with themselves and something going back a long time. I'm not sure.
Okay. So something about pigments. So we use pigments in which of those?
So every color
Three.
for physical
Okay.
thing that's printed out.
Excellent. Excellent. It does have to do something with the ink.
Right.
It's brighter.
Not as strong as the other primary red. Way darker red of the same color.
That's exactly right. So both of you are hitting on the correct answer, which is that when you, what's the biggest difference between a monitor and printing on paper? Exactly, that's exactly right. So when you are emitting light, you're combining colors, which you can do the same. You could also make a monitor with cyan, magenta, and yellow. Okay. But when you're emitting light, you're creating light at all of those wavelengths, right? And so your brightness is coming from what's otherwise a dark screen. When you're using ink on paper, you're looking at reflected. So just like you mentioned when you start mixing the inks, basically it works because you're absorbing the light that you can't see. But as soon as you start mixing inks, you're also absorbing light that you want to see. So basically, when you use red, green, and blue with inks to control absorption, you're bringing down the overall intensity of all the colors, even the colors that you're going to see. Whereas when you're displaying, you're not doing that. So it's the difference between emitted and reflected light. You could actually make a printer, and printers have existed that mix red, green, and blue ink. They just tend to not be as bright. Now, you also aren't going to do a good job with printers unless you add one more color. And that is because you've got a lot of brightness, right? But how do you make something then that's really dark? The answer is you can either pound on a bunch of cyan and yellow and magenta so you can literally fill the ink, or you can add black. So if any of you have these color ink printers, you know that they sell cyan and yellow and magenta because you also don't tend to use them in the same proportions. But if you want to print nice color images, if you don't have the black cartridge in there, it's not going to work well. So it's actually using all four. And the black is really just to get the darker. So it's not going to change how red it is, if you will, or how yellow it is. But it'll allow you to get to darker yellows. you're a creative artist, you probably appreciate this. If not, you probably know way more about colors than you want to. Your human eye, though, can distinguish, at least some people, up to 10 million colors. And this is just showing pictographically, actually, that you can combine magenta, yellow, and cyan to get reds, greens, and blues, and you can add the black to get the darker tones. All right, now we're going to get to software. These are HTML codes. Does anybody know what that first one is? You see all the colors, you can look at it right. The only reason I can't tell me is HTML. It's weird stuff. What is this? You should be reading like English language. Yes. It is. What's this one?
Reading.
All right, excellent. Excellent. And there's a cool, I'll put this up just briefly because I like it. I don't know if you forget, there's a little converter, so you can actually put in all zeros and get black. It's kind of intuitive. So this will come in handy someday. And so if you didn't know this was there, you'll remember it. Okay. What are the primary colors of a rainbow? We'll raise your hand. You've seen these. These are the pretty things in the sky, and there's a pot of gold at the end. Okay. Who wants to take it? Well, first, let's do a simple question. How many colors are there that you can see in a rainbow?
7 or 8.
Okay, 6, 7, and 8. Okay, who wants to try to see it? So, yeah.
Red, orange, yellow, green, and blue.
Okay, that's 6 colors. So that's actually an answer that most school kids in the United States said. They actually said those colors. So they said red, orange, yellow, green, blue, and purple. 6. Let's see if we're right. So there's 6 there, right? All right, we're going to come back to this in a little bit. What color is that? The rectangle. Okay.
It's the projector.
Yeah. Work with me. Let's just assume that's dark blue, because that's what the HTML code uncorrected for our projector tells us. It tells us it's dark blue, and that's light blue. Okay. We can bring purple here. Hold on a second. Let's see. I'm going to try to do this in real time here. I'm going to put a hashtag 800080, which is the HTML code for purple. So I'm actually kind of curious what it is. All right, so if this is purple, what's this? Okay, so HTML tells us that's dark blue and that's light blue. That's official names of the colors. So it's not blue, it's dark blue, and it's light blue. Okay. Apparently, kids in Russia, I'm going to read this eventually, go through school, they have different words. They don't have light blue and dark blue. That's not the word. I don't speak Russian. Apparently, there's just two different words for those colors. So it's not that there's blue and the word is light blue and it's dark blue. It's like it's blue and one word is white. Oops. I don't know. Another word is snuffle. So the words don't actually have anything to do with each other. So light blue and dark blue are as different colors to them as green and yellow. Just two different colors. And so when they look at a rainbow, they actually tend to say on average, you're going to get differences, but there's 7 colors. You know, because they can't look at it without that training and just see that there's two different, that there's just one blue. They see two different colors. So interestingly, you give a name to a color, and all of a sudden you start seeing light blue and dark blue, salmon, blue, and all sorts of other colors. I'm tapping in a little bit here on vision. That's going to be a little bit in the future, but I want to show you why this is relevant so that I continue to have your attention. So this is what we would call blue according to HTML in this projector. This is light blue, this is dark blue. And if you put different names on these, and that's what you're used to using, and there's no other word for it, right? Because you wouldn't call green dark yellow, right? But you could, theoretically, you could call it dark yellow. If you grew up all your life hearing that there was yellow and dark yellow, it could be that you couldn't actually see green without really working at seeing green. Okay, so it sounds like most of you were familiar with the HTML codes. This is just, I think there's 140 here. Basically, they assign a color that you can see to the code, but interestingly enough, they also assign a name. So there's not necessarily a consensus on the name for all the colors. If you're an artist, you may use different names. If you're a paint company, you're selling your paint at Home Depot, you may use different names that are more appealing to your particular customer. But in programming, there actually are names that are assigned to codes depending upon the convention that you decide to use. So if you had grown up in your entire life, people had talked about color Peru, this one, then there's a good chance that if I showed you something with that color, you would automatically see it. You'd say, oh, that's Peru, like this hat. Peru, I'm starting to see Peru everywhere. Would no longer be yellow or orange, which is what I would have called his hat before looking at this color chart. Okay. This is a little hard to read, and I apologize. And again, I think it's called foreshadowing. I'm kind of showing you where we're going. This is a chart that's mapping emotions on color view. The same kind of thought process. When you look in the middle, there are what you might call common generic emotions. I'm mad, I'm sad, I'm scared, joyful, powerful, and peaceful in this particular chart. Okay? And they show sort of the color wheel. And as you go out, it's a little bit different because it's inverted from what I showed you before, but the colors tend to become less pronounced as the emotions are written there. This is a little easier to read, so I'm going to focus more on this version. You can feel it. So we want to think about emotions like we think about colors. So we go through our whole life learning whatever the words are that you learn in whatever language it is that you learn there, and whoever happens to teach you about emotions. But it's a continuum. So just like the colors, just like there's 10 million colors you can see, maybe there's 10 million emotions you can feel. Maybe when your friend is feeling sad, right? Maybe they're feeling a light blue sad versus a dark blue sad versus a regular blue sad. But they have to tell you somehow what they're feeling, right? And so what are they going to say? I'm feeling hashtag 800FF0. And that was with 140 colors. Imagine 10 million colors. Imagine 10 million emotions. I'm going to put out a hypothesis theory or guess that I can't prove to you. But my guess is that they probably are on the order of a million emotions that you can actually feel. And if you were extremely articulate and taught all your friends these words, you might be able to find some commonality between those emotions. What they do when people are having problems with their emotions is they try to get them to work from the inside out. So they say, well, okay, you're sad. I get that you're sad. But there's one of these other words, kind of describe maybe a little bit better what you're feeling. You're feeling depressed, lonely, bored. Okay, you're feeling lonely. It's okay. So you're sad, you're feeling lonely. Is it because you've been left alone, or you're someone just totally left you, or because you're by yourself? So the idea is that if you increase your ability as you have an emotion to assign a more precise word to it, that you will then over time start truly feeling those emotions and understanding what you're feeling, just like if you're a painter or an artist or someone that does objectives for a living, and you have to become better at describing what color it is that you're seeing in order to do your job. Okay. So assigning a name to a color helps you see that color and getting used to using that name for that color. And assigning the right name to an emotion helps you feel that emotion. And having a more limited vocabulary, just like in the case of the rainbow, can have you actually seeing less colors in the rainbow. Now, the reality is that's a little bit of a trick question because going back to that, there's a continuum of colors in the rainbow. But the fact that whether we see 6, 7, or 8, or presumably 12 or 16, depend on how well we train ourselves to use words to pick out the different colors that now don't become red anymore, but blue, but they become red. Russian. We're not going to talk more about emotions today. So if you like talking about emotions, it's going to make you sad. And if you don't, then you're going to be happy. wanted to show you where we're going because our brains, whether it's sound, whether it's vision, whether it's sound, whether it's sight, or whether it's emotions, figure out what we are sensing, seeing, basically the same way. All right, now we can have a little more fun. We'll try to do this as a group. So what I want you to do is when you see, there's a bunch of slides. Okay, so when you see, and they're all going to be numbers, so it's not going to be a trick. It's all going to be. When you see the slide, you see the number, I want you, as soon as you see it, please, to say the number. Okay? And this is going to work best if everybody says the number as soon as you see it. If there's a delay, it's not going to work. If there's a delay because you don't see the number, that's good. Okay, are we ready? Okay, so let's practice with this one.
1, 7, 8, 6, 6, 9, 3, 8, 7, 9, 2, 5, 1, 9, 3, 2, 1, 2, 5, 3, 4, 1.
I'm pretty sure that is a 4, by the way. Okay, so we confirmed as a group that not everybody has the same ability to resolve focus. Some of it took some work. And by the way, that work, as you might imagine, was not being done really by your eyes. It was being done by your brain. Your brain was trying to say, I know there's a number. So I don't want to say nothing. I know there's a number there, so trying to use all this stuff that I'm talking about today, the brain's vision to make stuff up, right? Because your eyes didn't see it. Your eyes had seen it, would have said it right away. It didn't, it knew there was a number, so it was trying to figure out what number would make the most sense of what the eyes were showing. Great job, by the way. Those 9s were a little delayed. 9? You can hear this on the video. It'll be all right, this is one maybe you're most familiar with. I'll start with the bottom of Tony. Apparently, it's the #1 top-selling poster of all time. I don't make this stuff up. We can start here, actually. Let's see. You can do it with your glasses and see if you need a new prescription. Okay. So this is a scale. It's called the Snellen chart. And it's meant to, so we just did my experiment, just a teaching moment, I guess, with respect to colors. Our ability to resolve different colors. We talked about, well, if you name colors in the practice, then we'll be better to see those colors. You could actually do that with that test that we just saw. You focus on the colors that we used in the test. You would do a better job of resolving questions.
Permanence on Snelling was 1908, 1934 to 1908.
Oh, shoot. He lived backwards. And I'll find out when he actually passed away.
Very little time.
Before I put the slides on, I always make sure to correct the slide. Thank you. So that was a test. One person in the class. That's good. Okay. So anybody read that bottom line? below the
Yeah, there's a little bit of a work advantage here.
9? In the front.
He should be able to.
So this scale is basically, if you're not familiar with this, if you've got great vision, you may not be as familiar with it. But presumably, this 20/200 E it has to do with how far you can see. So I always get this a little confused. But basically, most people can make out that E, and as the number starts going down, it's the distance basically that you should be able to see it. So most humans at 20 feet can read this. So if you can't read this, but you can only read this, well, this is what most humans can read at 200 feet, but you have to be at 20 feet to see.
That also depends on the size of the poster.
Yeah.
Pixels.
Yeah. This isn't meant to be a test for how you are here in class. So I'm curious. Can anybody read that yet?
Oh, okay.
What does it say?
Yeah.
Hey. Okay, that one's pretty small. Okay, so basically there, we can do a test for, I just made that one up, so I don't know what eyesight you have there. Here's another test that's for astigmatism. Here you can close, basically cover one eye and look at the image on the right. And what you should see is equidistant. Each of the branches should be equidistant and of the same shape. And then you can cover the other eye. I don't have astigmatism, but my understanding of the test is that if you do, you'll see different shades of the lines, even though they're all the same shape.
I definitely wouldn't take off my glasses, right? This is.
Yeah, well, your glasses should be correct. That's one of the things with glasses. Change correct. Now, what's happening there is one of a couple of things. One is your cornea can be misshaped, so instead of being sort of a rounded dome, it may be more oblong or elliptical. Or you may have an irregularly shaped lens. It's the lens here. Now, your brain can do a lot for compensating if you know what something is supposed to look like, or if you know it's supposed to be a letter. You can go for a long time having some of these optical eye issues if your brain's actually correcting for. So that gets back more to vision, which we're not talking about today. Okay, so now let's talk about how we do this artificially. If you don't recall this by now, you may recall eventually that the electromagnetic spectrum is big. We'll make it even bigger here. Right, it goes from gamma rays on the one side that have very small wavelengths to, and you can see that number there, it's 0.1 angstrom, so a fraction basically of atomic size. And it goes all the way here to 1,000 meters on this scale, which is longer waves. So we have radio waves. These are the things that make your cell phone work in this range here. We have microwaves, so the microwaves, between radio and microwaves are the cellular phones. With microwaves, infrared, which we consider to be more light, visible, which is the part that you can see, and ultraviolet, X-rays, and gamma rays. And from a sensing standpoint, I can tell you that there are sensing technologies for that entire range. So if you wanted to make a super Sophia, you could theoretically make one that was sensitive to a lot more than what we can actually see. And we can sense some of these things. We can sense gamma rays. And if you're sensing that, that's not a good thing because you're not going to live for very long. But in terms of resolving something and sensing something we can resolve, it's in this regime here. We talked about yesterday, there's some, like, if you're absorbing ultraviolet, you might feel your skin or infrared as well. So it's not to say that you're totally insensitive to this, but in terms of making use of it and resolving it in some way, make some decision, it's pretty much in this range. Limited to. I know I've said that a few times, I just want you to remember it. Okay, so light is very small, sensors exist for all of it. The sensors look very different. I'm not going to be going into today other types of sensors. Today I'm going to be talking about mostly photonic sensors, which are sensors that are built to more mimic the eye. So you use these types of sensors more than just what humans can see. You use them to basically right around here. Once you get out here, you have to use different types of sensors. Interestingly, your cell phone uses sensors to sense radiation out here, and that's where your actual signal is. That's what it contains. That's why you can make actually a phone call or access the web, because you can not only receive, but you can send light, if you will, photons at these wavelengths. But you have to use a camera if you want to take a picture of someone that you can see in those wavelengths. So same energy source, electromagnetic spectrum, but using two very different ways. Okay, so now we're getting into artificial sensing of things that we can see. This is a cartoon representation of a pixel or a photodiode that is covered by a filter with a low lens. And you have seen this format before. We have a lens that's not shown, because this is a really baby lens. But there's a big lens out here. That's the lens you can see on the outside of the camera. That's directing light. It goes through the micro lens. It goes through a filter that hits the photodiode. And then that's going to create electric current that then you can measure in some way. I measure it as a charge, as a voltage, as an actual current. And that's basically how it works. So again, very analogous to what our eye is doing. The analogy here is that the photodiode, if it's actually doing that reception, it's like the cell. It's the neurocell. It's causing the electrical impulse to go up. To make the red cone cell, remember I have 4 types, I have rods and 3 different types of cones, I need to put a filter here. What if I don't put a filter there? What kind of cell would I have? Do you remember? If you don't put filter, we're not going to be able to distinguish color. So that would be comparable to having a rod. So there's rods that didn't distinguish colors, right? You just bring in all the light, and then there was red, green, and blue This would be analogous to a red cell. If you don't have a filter, then it would be analogous to a rod. And after it goes through, basically it creates electric current. Yes?
So you're basically saying it would be grayscale or just?
Yeah. Very still. Correct. So I'm putting them here together so you can see. To me, it's fascinating how technology actually sort of mimics reality. And not much has changed in this respect. Right? Remember, the light comes in, it forms an upside down image. Same thing happens here. Light comes in, forms an upside down image. Remember, there's this initial cornea and lens that's directing the light. It's here, that's the lens you see outside. Remember, there's 4 types of different cells here. There are your neuro signals, right, that respond to different types of light. Here in this picture, I'm only showing the colors, red, green, and blue. There are devices that have red, green, blue, and transparent, which would be exactly basically what we have. And as you might imagine, a transparent one tends to be more sensitive than a red, green, and blue one, because when you get blue, all you're doing is you're filtering out every other kind of light. So you're throwing away most of the light that's coming. When you put a transparent one, you're welcoming all the red, all the green, and all the blue. So if you want to have a very sensitive sensor to see in dark, it's better to not worry about color. If you're a semiconductor person, you'll appreciate this slide here. This is a cross section of a semiconductor device zoomed in a lot. Remember, your camera might have, even on your phone, it's going to have millions of pixels. This is essentially showing you one particular element or diode here. This is here CFA is the filter. You can't tell by looking at it if it happens to be red, green, or blue. But what they do is they put a pattern on top of the diodes so that there's some diodes that are just green diodes, and some are red diodes, and some are blue, and some are green. And each one of these is essentially a cell. So the diodes that are under here effectively combine to be one pixel. And again, they put two green ones because if you did, they would be asymmetric. And if you might recall, green is the one that's sort of in the middle. So by receiving diode at a green, a red, a green, and a blue, you can put in the RGB, if you will, and get your HTML code if you want, right, for that color. So hopefully what I'm doing here is showing you how you can take light, put it through an electrical device, and get something that you can work with in an artificial system. It's a pattern that's called a Bayer pattern. It has been, I think it still is, the most common filter pattern that's put on top of an array. So to review here a little bit, you have photons coming in, and during some exposure time, we talk about this, right? Sometimes exposure. They hit pixels, generates electrons, we put a little circuit magic on it, and then we digitize it. We showed you that a little bit last time when we talked about audio. So now we have multiple signals that are coming out. Different colors, different positions, we got to keep track of all of that. So that's why vision and sight is a lot more complicated than sound. There's a lot more data that's coming in at the same time. And then we turn it into a number. If there's no filter, then that's exactly what we're going to get, some sort of grayscale. But once we do that, we can do stuff with that image like AI. So now we're getting to the example part. There are analogies again here to sound. There's a lot more examples than what I've put up here. One is fingerprinting, image fingerprinting. We had audio fingerprinting before where you could detect who a specific person was by hearing and doing some sound analysis. You can take sound bites from different people, put it through an AI, and then have the AI predict who the person is just based on listening to the sound. We can do the same thing with faces. The first time this was attempted in phones was actually, I want to say maybe about 8 years ago, when Google put it into their cell phones with a technology called Face Unlock. Apple tends to rename everything, so now you may know it as Face ID. Came out, I think, a year ago. So that's the idea that you can image a person and just by looking at some facial features. I'm not saying they are using AI, I'm saying you can use AI. So just like in sound, a lot of applications where you can just develop little plain algorithms, and you can also do some of these applications with AI. Image classification, target recognition is probably one of the first. I would call it most sophisticated applications of AI. That's because it's used primarily for military purposes. We take satellite imagery and try to identify things that they want humans to look at and to see if people are moving missiles around and things like that. Object identification is one that's in the press a lot because it's one of the benchmarks that's used a lot for determining how big the AI is. Repositories of lots of images and tag images that you can train on and then see if there are algorithms and anybody else's algorithm. Again, just looking at images. Image search. You can try this today. It doesn't work necessarily all that well, but if you have it, you can go into Google and upload an image, and it's going to return images that it believes are similar to the image that you uploaded. It's using AI to do that. Medical diagnostics, I'm going to show you an example of that, or at least talk to an example of that in a minute. Is there a question? And then image processing is another one. There's a lot of things within each of these categories. Here's one example I just pulled off with some published work related to visual representations where you can have multiple layers of an AI. This is a convolutional network where each of the layers gives you varying degrees of abstractedness related to the image, which can be useful if you're trying to compare not just one animal species to another animal species, but also trying to compare, say, within the same animal species. Remember the AI, the analogy is saying, okay, it's a dog versus it's a cat, versus saying it's my dog versus someone else's cat, or it's a human versus non-human, and say, oh, it's Raphael, Miguel, Harvey. So that's just a different example. This is another example. This is, you may remember, but probably not. This is the company I started in 2009, so 10 years ago. It's a company called Spectral MD. I actually am not involved in the AI part of that because it's an effort that was started a few years ago after I left. But they use AI to help diagnose the treatment that's necessary for burns. And this I just pulled off from the IBM website because I showcase the company as one of the examples of using AI and their technology, because we actually use their servers to do these calculations. And basically what we do is we take imaging data that has tens of megapixels, if you will, and they're divided up into multiple slices of color. So now we're looking at just red, green, and blue. And they're multiple slices of time. And then those have to be analyzed spectroscopically, both spectroscopic wavelengths of light, so also frequencies of sound variation. And you create an image of a person's skin who's been burned. And basically what you're trying to do by doing AI on those time slices of those images over time is seeing if that person needs to have burn surgery or not. Burn surgery is certainly very expensive. It has to happen in hospitals with controlled environments. Because once your skin is exposed, basically if it gets infected, which is easy to do, you can die. And so what they demonstrated is that the AI allows them to do better than the best trained doctors.